Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What Do They Know podcast. On today's episode, the guys will answer a question that was sent in by one of our viewers on our social media page, review episode 2 of HBO Hard Knocks, and tackle the AFC and NFC South and give you their thoughts and review. Don't forget to send in any questions or thoughts that you want to hear discussed on next week's episode on any of our social media outlets. But hey, what do they know?
What do they know? Well, you're about to find out. What's going on, everybody? This is episode 2 of the What Do They Know podcast. I'm Nick Hoskins with my best bud, Jeff Garcia. And this is episode 2, so welcome. What's going on, man? How are you?
Doing all right.
How was your week?
It was a little stressful. Yep. We had contract negotiations going on at my workplace.
Yep.
Union versus management and whatnot, but
always fun.
But we got through it. We got a new contract pushed through Friday and voted in, so it'll take effect Monday, and we're good to go for the next 5 years. So
good stuff.
How about with you?
I'm good, man. Week was it was a little painful. I'm recovering. I'm recovering from a minor procedure. I won't get into details, but we'll just say that me and Christy are officially done having kids. So I'll let you guys figure that out.
Put in a cap.
Yep.
Put in a cap.
So I'm in recovery, but no, doing good. All good as far as that's concerned. But yeah, good week and ready to, we're 1 week closer to the NFL season. So I'm ready to dive into these divisional reviews. First, I just wanted to talk. We had one question come in this week, and I think we'll go ahead and answer that first. And the question was, what do we think the Jets' game plan is for after Aaron Rodgers? Do we think that it's going to be Zach Wilson, or do we think they're going to go in another direction? I didn't send in this question, obviously, as a Jets fan, but I love talking about it. So thank you for the question.
I love the question. I'm not even a Jets fan.
It is a good question.
It's a very interesting question.
I think it creates a lot of dialogue, right? I think best case scenario, Zach learns from Aaron for the next couple of years. He grows. He can kind of sit back and watch, exactly like Aaron Rodgers did, and exactly like Jordan Love, did for under Aaron Rodgers. And ideally, he can come in and kind of take over when Rodgers steps back.
Right.
And I think if you were to ask anybody in the Jets front office, that's what the plan is. That's what they hope to happen. And I'll let you comment, but I'll read you an interesting tweet that I actually saw from Aaron Rodgers today. He was being interviewed during the Jets pregame show. They're playing a preseason game as we record right now. But this is a quote from Aaron Rodgers. He said, "I'd like to play a few good years here and then hand it off to Zach for the next 15. So he said that to Otis Livingston on the CBS pregame show from their game tonight. And I think that, if you're a Jet fan, that's easy, right?
Love to hear it.
As long as you see growth from Zach Wilson.
Right.
If it's the same old Zach Wilson, then get him out of here.
Right.
But I think, if he is able to grow and observe these next couple of years, I think that's hands down best case scenario. What are your thoughts?
I think that whole thing brings up two interesting dynamics. First, we all know how Aaron Rodgers didn't enjoy Jordan Love being there in Green Bay, and he kind of felt being kicked out and whatnot. But here, he's actually embracing that role
100%
with Zach Wilson. So how much tutoring is he going to do with Zach Wilson? I think a lot more than he did with Jordan Love. So with Zach Wilson, you already got a leg up over Jordan Love in that respect. It'll be interesting to see how much Zach Wilson embraces that role, being the one being tutored rather than being thrusted into a role that he wasn't prepared for at all. Second thing is, he says a few years in that tweet.
That makes me happy.
Yeah, that makes
me very happy as a Jet fan.
Very exciting.
Very happy.
Obviously with Green Bay, he was playing it year by year.
Yeah.
He would go on a retreat every offseason, and then we'll see how if the gopher shows his saddle or whatnot. And another year of Aaron Rodgers. But here he says a few years. That's awesome for him. Zach Wilson, I think we'll see how much it goes the first year Aaron Rodgers is no longer in New York, because he from what I've seen, even from Hard Knocks, even episode 2.
It's a great transition.
Yep.
Great transition. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. But he's being embraced as just take it easy, let things come to you, and just don't hassle yourself.
Yeah.
Don't
do too much.
Don't beat yourself up over things that you'll learn over time. for me, when that first time where he has a hiccup after Aaron Rodgers is gone, how is he going to embrace it or reflect on it and come back from it, essentially? If he goes back to Zach Wilson pre-Aaron Rodgers, then, yeah, it's going to be a one-and-done deal in all likelihood. If not, then we can say Aaron Rodgers tutored him quite a bit. And best case scenario, you said, he goes on for 10, 15 years as the true face of the franchise from then on, like as they originally planned. But for me, I've always enjoyed young quarterbacks taking a step back, like Patrick Mahomes and others who just take a step back and learn the process and then see how NFL players carry themselves. Because going from college, as we know, partying, all sorts of things happening at college. NFL is straight business. You have to dedicate yourself to the job, especially at the quarterback position, in order to be successful at that level.
Yep. Great question. Thank you for sending that in. I think we're all kind of intrigued to see how that plays out. But transitioning perfectly, Jeff mentioned episode 2 of Hard Knocks. What was your take? What stood out? What did you think was interesting from this week's episode?
Well, Zach Wilson was a big part of it. I already touched up a little bit on that. Besides that, they dwelled into a little bit on your rookie defensive end, Will McDonald. He got a sack on that previous preseason game. So, and a lot of hype surrounding him, according to the dialogue. So we'll see how he transitions. Aaron Rodgers, he still got it on the play fakes.
Oh yeah, that was so interesting.
Oh yeah.
For those who didn't watch, they did a segment in the quarterback room where they had 2 clips side by side, and they were essentially the same exact play, but one was a play action fake and one was actually a run. And so the coach, it was the three or four quarterbacks in the room. The coach, would freeze it at the same time where it was either going to be a handoff or a play fake, and had everybody choose. Except for Rodgers, because I think they were all of him.
Yeah, that's what I would have loved to see, if Rodgers analyzing Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle, I believe is the other quarterback names.
Yep. And I tell you what, they were wrong more often than not.
Oh, yeah.
So that just shows how good, to your point, how good he is. Yeah. Anything else?
Besides that, obviously you got your scrimmages over there. They were playing against Carolina.
Yep.
Bryce Young made a few appearances there. I would have loved to see a lot more of that whole action rather than just straight sideline talk with the Jets. But it is what it is. You can't show too much, I'm assuming, per NFL rules, and that's fine and all. But for me, it was a great episode. I enjoyed it. What you
I enjoyed it much more than episode 1, right? I thought episode 1 was all the fluff and the excitement around Aaron Rodgers, and there really wasn't any detail to it at all. I felt like episode 2, you got more into the nitty gritty, like the details. To your point, I think Will McDonald is going to be a stud. I think Joe Douglas, that's just another example of him hitting the lottery in his draft picks. He's done a phenomenal job so far, and I think that he's going to prove to be the same. The big thing for me, the big clip that everybody seemed to be talking about on Twitter and everything after the episode aired, was the clip of Robert Saleh just laying into the offensive line.
Yes.
That, to me, I loved to see that. I was watching it with my wife, Christy, and she's like, "Oh, that's so sad." And I'm like, "No, I love that." I wanted to stand up and high five him, because everybody knows that's the biggest question mark for the Jets going into this season. Mm-hmm. They have the talent everywhere else. And he even said it, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect of, we only go as far as the big boys take us, or it's time for the big boys up front to step up. Mm-hmm. And, they had a terrible couple practices that showed where Rodgers was just getting sacked time after time after time.
Oh, yeah.
And they struggled against Carolina's defense in joint practices. And so I really loved to see that side of Robert Saleh, because you never see that. He's, he sometimes criticized as being not vocal enough, or not, too much of a player's coach, whatever. Well, he really showed you that is a different side of him in that pep talk. And I mean, not for nothing, it's preseason, you can't put too much stake in it, but that game against Carolina, their offensive line went out and showed out. They played great. So that was the biggest takeaway, was that scene for me where he, basically let them know that what they're doing is not good enough,
right?
And they need to step it up. So
he put that offense on blast.
He really
real
did.
Quick.
He really did. And I listen to ESPN radio all the time, and they were analyzing the episode kind of like we are now. And it was from a former player's perspective, and he said it's one thing to get called out, in the media or whatever, or pulled off to the side. It's another thing to get called out in that setting, in your locker room with your entire team around, and basically told that like your whole position group is not doing well enough.
Right.
He said that's a whole different sort of situation. So I loved it. And I hope there's more of that, because I think it really lit. I mean, how could it not light a fire in you?
Accountability
as a player. Yeah. So, really enjoyed the episode. Like I said, I thought it was a lot more detailed than episode 1. So I enjoyed that. It's funny. I was talking to my wife, Christy, about it. And I said, basically what I just told you, I really enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot more detail, a lot more actual football stuff. And she goes, oh, maybe that's why I thought that it was so boring. She's like, I really liked episode 1, but I thought episode 2 was boring. I just thought that was funny for a different change of perspective.
Right.
But yeah, so really looking forward to episode 3, as you and I talked about earlier, because from the sounds of it, the Jets and the Bucks were doing joint practices this week and got into some pretty good scraps. So I can't wait to see
Coach
the coverage.
got injured.
Yeah, coach got injured, sent to the hospital. So we'll see what they end up showing on Hard Knocks, and we'll do that review next week. But speaking of the Panthers, we'll kind of dive in this week. Episode 2, we're doing a review of the AFC and the NFC South. Same as last week, right? We'll go through the teams, kind of what we're looking for, who we think is going to stand out, and then we'll go through it from a fantasy perspective as well. So we'll start on the AFC side in no particular order, with the Tennessee Titans. Kind of give me your thoughts there and what you're looking at with them this year.
So with Tennessee, like it has been the past few years, it starts and ends with Derrick Henry and that offensive line. That's their identity, their ground and pound. The problem is, after so many years of running Derrick Henry into the ground, how much does he have left in the tank?
Yep.
It's. I think last year he was injured. Was he injured quite a bit last year? You got that offensive line always going through changes. I think they drafted a first-round tackle this year, so we'll see how much that fluctuates. Ryan Tannehill's still there. We'll see if they open the playbook a little bit more for him. Especially with D-Hop there, DeAndre Hopkins, you'd hope the passing game will evolve or take the next step with DeAndre Hopkins there. But with Tennessee, it's always feels like the passing game never truly translates into what it should hope to be. So from there, they just seem to like tread water at all times. I'm obviously, as a Tennessee fan, for Tennessee fans out there, you hope Ryan Tannehill can take a step in the right direction, just have a career year of some sort.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry has one last hoorah before he starts showing that wear and tear, and defense holds up. So, but for me, they'll be about middle of the pack in the AFC altogether.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like people forget, and I honestly forgot when I was researching them. This, kind of doing my homework for this week. They were 7-3 at one point last season, and then they lost They lost the last 7 or 8 games to end the season. And so people, I kind of forgot that, hey, they were in that spot where they were the top tier AFC team at one point. And then to your point, they got decimated by injuries. They lost Tannehill. I think they lost Derrick Henry for a period of time. And so I'll be curious to see. I actually wrote down, and this is, they're the most boring good team. Like, I feel like they're always good, they're always solid, but they do nothing flashy.
No.
Right? They're hard-nosed, gritty, defensive, run the football type team. And so I feel like a lot of times, because they have that style of play, they get forgotten about.
Oh yeah. They always try to outwork you rather than out-talent you, and it works most of the time. It makes you a good team.
And I think that's a direct reflection of Mike Vrabel, excuse me. Right. I think he's just that type of guy.
Oh yeah.
And they really do a good job of emulating him. But I'm very curious to see the impact that DeAndre Hopkins can have on this team. Obviously, he's shown with all of the quarterbacks that he's caught passes from that he does not need a top-tier quarterback to put up numbers.
Yeah.
And, Tannehill is serviceable, right? He's no slouch. I would say he's kind of middle of the pack as far as overall quarterback.
He's been consistent for all of his career.
He's very consistent. Yep. I will say that I think a big storyline for the Titans, at least in my mind, is does Tannehill play the whole season, right? Because you think they got Malik Willis behind him, who they drafted last year or the year before, and then they just this year drafted Will Levis from Kentucky. So they got some guys behind him anxiously waiting for him to slip up at all, whether that's performance or injury or whatever. Me personally, I'll be surprised if Tannehill is the quarterback to end the season. I just don't see that happening. I think they have too much going on behind them. To your point, I don't think that they're necessarily going to be competing for a division title. I don't know. I think they're going to kind of be, I don't want to say below average, probably average this year is where I have them. But I'm curious. I think that it's going to be an interesting year for them. Potentially a modified rebuild, maybe not a full rebuild. But I think it's going to be a different year than they're used to.
Right.
Let's go to the Colts. The Colts have a big year. I received a text this year from one of my really good buddies, Wes. Shout out Wes, who's a diehard Colts fan in Indy, and he knew we were doing the AFC and the NFC South this week, and he said, "quote Go easy on my Colts.
Go easy."
So we'll keep that in mind. No,
I don't think
sorry,
I can.
Wes. No.
I don't know you, Wes, but you're not going to like me.
So give me your thoughts on the Colts.
The Colts, I don't see bright things happening this year. They drafted Anthony Richardson, 4th overall, I believe, this past draft. So at least they have someone there. Obviously, you have the Jonathan Taylor situation, which is the biggest headline there.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, I talked about it last week with Austin Eckler. How much is Jonathan Taylor going to put out there for an organization that he doesn't believe they're trying to pay him or pay him what he's worth?
Basically said they won't pay him.
Yeah.
Basically said that if he were to never play in the NFL again, that he'd be forgotten about. I mean,
that's rough.
That's crazy.
That's
we can
rough
get into that later, but go ahead.
That's your all-pro running back.
Yeah.
That's basically the face of your franchise right now. I just can't see anywhere or any shape or form that the Colts team is going to go out there and give it their all for that organization right now this year at least. They're going to have to rebuild quite a few things, offensive line, defensive identity. They brought in a new coach, Shane Steichen from Philadelphia. We'll see how he's more offensive minded and worked with Jalen Hurts. So we'll see if he can transition some of that success with Jalen Hurts to Anthony Richardson. But then they're going to need a lot of pieces to build around Anthony Richardson before they're ready to contend. And personally, it starts with your offensive line. I always believe it starts with your lines. And then from there, we'll see if Jonathan Taylor gets paid or if they let him go or see what direction they go with the running backs. And then wide receivers, they got Michael Pittman Jr. on one side, and then I can't even name who the second one is.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think it's going to be a tough sledding this year. And
I think this year is going to be all about deciding, is Anthony Richardson that guy? Right. And putting him in the best position. I can't remember a time where I've heard such conflicting things on a player or on a prospect, right? I hear he was a horrible, he played horrible in college. Why? I was listening again to ESPN radio, and there was some guy saying basically like he doesn't understand how he got drafted 4th because he didn't even play that well in college.
Right. And
then I hear on the other side of the spectrum that he's a physical freak. He dominated the combine. The Colts hit a home run, and this guy has a chance to just be downright special. And so it's like, man, what's going to happen here? So it's like, it's just, two totally different storylines. So I think that is what I'm most interested in with the Colts is, and I heard comparisons to Donovan McNabb. I've heard a better arm than Josh Allen. I've heard, obviously I think he's like 240 pounds right now, but can run a 4.4. which is crazy. If that, and that kind of explains why he got drafted 4th. But I heard something today where everybody said that Josh Allen didn't have enough experience coming out of college, and he had just over 700 total attempts in college.
Mm-hmm.
Richardson had just over 300 attempts. So you talk about lack of experience. I feel like that is where you're obviously going to have a lot of growing pains.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that it's exciting for the Colts and Colts fans in the sense that, okay, did we get our guy? Like, are we going to be set up for the next 10 years? But I don't know how many wins that's going to translate to this year.
Right.
So,
and this is part of the whole argument with young quarterbacks coming in. You come in and you don't have a complete roster built around this young quarterback.
Yeah,
you're setting them up for failure, and this is why Anthony Richardson. I hope he does well, but at the same time, I'd give him a couple of years before making any judgments on him. If this year's a flop, work on him over another offseason and give him another try next year. You can't go in drafting another quarterback high next year. Build and get an offensive tackle, offensive guard, center. Just build your offensive line, get talent around him, and see how he does with a better roster. But yeah, Anthony Richardson has all the talent in the world. We'll see how that translates with Steichen.
Yep, agreed. So we'll move on to the Texans. What are you looking for with the Texans?
Texans. I'm hoping they take step in the right direction because that franchise needs it in the worst way.
Yeah, no doubt.
They've
talk about falling off a cliff after getting rid of Watson.
Watson, yep.
I mean, my goodness.
Yep, that whole debacle, and then trading him away to Cleveland. They got their guy in C.J. Stroud.
Yep.
They traded up for the pick after that with the Cardinals to get
Will Anderson.
Anderson.
Yep.
So
new coach DeMeco Ryans.
He's been on the radar for quite a couple of years.
Quite a while, yeah.
Yep. From the 49ers.
Former Texan as a player.
Yep.
Right. So
to me, they're going to come in with a new identity. They're going to come in very youthful. They made a lot of offseason signings. Dalton Schultz,
sneaky.
Robert Woods.
Yeah.
They extended Tunsil, offensive tackle there.
Yep.
So they have a lot of good things happening for them. They paid a king's ransom to the Cardinals for that Will Anderson pick.
Yeah, they did.
So they're hoping that hits in a big way.
Yep.
And personally, I think it will. I'm high on Anderson and C.J. Stroud. So to me, I think the Texans will be a lot better than what a lot of people will assume or jump in the gun to predict. I believe in the Texans. I believe in their plans. I believe in DeMeco Ryans, and I just don't see them taking even a further step back because there's not really many step backs that you can take from where they were at.
Yeah, I'm with you with pretty much everything you just said. I think that I wrote down DeMeco Ryans is that guy. I think that he has that mentality that guys love to play for. He came from San Francisco as a defensive coordinator, and he was prior to that. Robert Saleh was there too, and they both are kind of similar, very boisterous on the sidelines. Will yell for you, cheer for you, know exactly how you're thinking or how they're feeling, and I think that goes a long way with the players. I have high hopes for C.J. Stroud. I think it's kind of similar in the sense with Anthony Richardson, maybe not this year, but I think that Stroud, the way he carries himself, what I saw from him in college at Ohio State, I think that can definitely translate. I think that, Dalton Schultz could be a sneaky big help for him this year. I mean, what did you say prior to the show when we were talking about tight ends? They're the rookie quarterback's best friend.
A young quarterback's best friend is always his tight end.
And I think that, obviously Dalton Schultz,
big signing.
He balled out in Dallas.
Yep.
And so I think that he could have a sneaky big impact with Houston. Again, this year, as far as improvement or a good year, 6 or 7 wins, I think would be they would be happy with that in the front office. Maybe not as fans, but
right.
When you're coming off of 3 or 4 wins multiple years in a row, I think that would be a huge jump and a sign that they're moving in the right direction. So I'm excited to see where the Texans go. We'll round out the division with the Jaguars, division champs last year.
Well, it's their division to lose, in my opinion. Trevor Lawrence, year 3, obviously had a great year last year after the whole Urban Meyer fiasco that first year in his rookie year. But he's got his footing now. He's got offensive weapons around him all over the place. To me, they're the way. They're going to be the pinnacle of that division for quite a while, in my opinion. They lost a couple pieces right there in the offensive line. Jawan Taylor, I think, signed with Kansas City. Tackle Cam Robinson's suspended for PEDs for the first 4 games, I believe. They drafted a tackle in the first round, but to me, it'll all make up for it. They got the pieces around them. I think I'm very high on the Jags this year.
Yeah, I think that you said it perfectly, right? It's their division to lose. I think that they kind of came out of nowhere last year. Not a lot of people, I don't know of anybody who thought that the Jags were going to win the division last year.
No.
And I think that they're only going to improve offensively. I mean, you talk about Calvin Ridley. That trade last year, I mean, it could potentially go down as one of the sneaky best trades in the history of the trade deadline,
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, you trade for a guy who's currently suspended for the whole year, and then knowing what he could bring you the following year.
Yep.
I think that's going to be huge. I think that we talk about Trevor Lawrence. Year 3 is where they really, with the quarterback's progression. Year 3 is really where you're expected to make that jump.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe he kind of expedited that a little bit last year. I mean, he made a lot of improvements last year.
For sure.
So I think if you talk about making a jump again this year, that could mean some scary things for the NFL, for the rest of the NFL. I think that he could be potentially, we're talking about one of the faces of the NFL coming up pretty soon. I think, so I think one of the sneaky things that I'm looking for this year with the Jags is Travis Etienne. I think that guy's a stud. He already had a great year last year.
Yep.
And I think that when you add Calvin Ridley, the threat to pass, I think that Etienne, he's one of those 3-down guys that can catch the ball also.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that makes him a huge threat. I think Doug Peterson is a phenomenal coach. I mean, you saw him do it in Philly, and now you're already, after 1 year, the impact that he made there. I'm excited to see what they do this year. So I think that we're on the same page with the Jags. I think they're, they're sitting in a good spot going into this year.
Well, absolutely. Speaking of last year acquirements from the Jags,
Yep.
Christian Kirk, another year.
Yeah.
Another year in that system
Yeah.
with Trevor Lawrence, building that connection. And I've seen some film from Trevor Lawrence during this preseason, and he's been making his reads really, really well.
It's so funny. It's so funny about Christian Kirk. We can talk about this a little bit later, but I feel like when he got that massive contract from them, everybody was like, what are the Jags doing? Where did that even come from? And he had a great year last year.
Yep,
He was a huge part of their success. And I think he could, you'll talk about it a little bit later, but I think he's primed for an even bigger year this year. So that's a great call out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll transition to the NFC South, and we'll start with the Carolina Panthers. What are you looking for there? Obviously, a lot of storylines with them.
Yes, they're another team just like Houston. A lot of youth coming in.
Yeah.
You got Bryce Young taken first overall. Carolina traded up for him. Obviously, that's their guy, and that will be their guy for quite a while. But same with Houston. Same with Indianapolis. They need to make sure they build a roster around them that befits a number 1 overall pick and to match their potential and their talent. I know they made a lot of offseason acquisitions, especially on the defensive side. Shai Tuttle, former Saint,
Yep.
Shout out former Saints. But it just all depends on how, I guess, Bryce Young comes out and gets a feel for that offense as much as possible, as soon as possible. I know a lot of people have Carolina up top on their NFC South division rankings, because I'll be the first to admit that division is not powerful.
Hasn't been, at least.
It hasn't been.
Has a chance to be better this year, I think.
Absolutely.
Right? But
everybody made improvements. Everybody made signings, and there's a youth movement going on in quite a few franchises in that division. But in terms of the Panthers, they will be there. I just don't think it'll be this year.
Yeah, I think when you talk about rookie quarterbacks, I think there's less of a question mark with Bryce Young, right? I think for the most part, everybody can agree that he's the guy. I think that he's going to be a stud for a long time. I will say he looks tiny. Oh my goodness! I was watching the game last week, preseason game against the Jets, and he just looks like a boy amongst men.
Isn't he listed like 5'10" or
just
something?
based off of his stature, man? He is so tiny. So I think that is, obviously one thing that he might have going against him. I think the other thing, just now I'll preface this with it's preseason. You can't put too much, emphasis on what you see.
Right.
But from last night's game against the Giants and last week's game against the Jets, I think that the Panthers could have a huge problem at offensive line.
Oh, absolutely.
Both games, Bryce Young was running for his life. We talked about last week, the Jets dominated both up front, defensively and offensively. And so I think that that's where he could potentially, be sped up as far as his timing, his reads, running for his life. So I think that I'm a little concerned for him from that aspect. But they definitely, again, watching, and I didn't realize this until I was watching the game last week, they went out and they tried their best to put some pieces around him. They signed Adam Thielen from the Vikings.
Yeah, that's a great signing.
It's a great signing. He's like that safety net guy. He's going to run a 6-yard out and be right there.
Yeah, and that guy, he's seen it all in terms of defense of what they're trying to do to him. Yep. And for a young quarterback, he can relay what he's seeing out there, and he'll be a great mentor for Bryce Young.
Yep. Miles Sanders, they signed him at running back. Hayden Hurst at tight end. So they did a good job of putting some weapons around him, and then obviously Frank Reich coming over from Indianapolis. I think that he could have a huge impact on the development in a positive way for Bryce Young. So a lot of things happening there. Again, I think you and I are both on the same page. We're not as high on them this year,
right?
As some people are, but I think that they have a bright future.
Oh, absolutely.
Falcons, Atlanta Falcons. What are you thinking there?
Falcons. Well, I like their offense. I really like their offense. Desmond Ridder. I'm expecting him to make that second-year jump. I know he has his problems, his up and downs.
And he only played a couple games last year.
I believe it was like 4.
Yeah.
But to me, he at least showed the resilience and the courage to throw the ball, at least to fling it somewhat. Drake London, Kyle Pitts before he got injured. At least he wants to throw the ball. He's not a run-first quarterback. His first sign of trouble, first read, he's not there. Take off and run with the ball. To me, Desmond Ridder, I think if he gets the offensive flow going, he can be a really decent quarterback in this league. Obviously, you have the other pieces around him. Drake London, Kyle Pitts is still there. He's coming off a MCL injury. We'll see how he looks week 1. He should be recovered by then. And then you got their top overall draft pick last year, Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, a lot of people have high hopes for him.
Very electrifying is what I've been hearing from camp. So we'll see how they go about their offensive flow, whether it's a run heavy or a pass heavy, or I'm assuming run heavy. But they have, I believe, the offensive line to do it and the running back now to do it. So defensive side, we'll see how that happens, but I'm not too high on their defense this year. They made quite a few acquisitions back there as well, but I say just give it another year on that defense. Give a little bit of a youth movement going into next year, and we'll see how they fare better next year.
Yeah, and they did a lot in the offseason, both drafting and with free agency for that defense, which I think is something that they needed. They've always, you spoke to their offense. They've had the weapons the last few years, but they haven't had the defense to stop a nosebleed. And this year, I think that's going to be a little different. Obviously, Bijan Robinson looks like he's going to be special. I mean, his first run last night was like this 12-yard run where he's spinning and running over people and just kind of showcasing everything that he's about. And so I think that he's going to be special. Obviously, we have Kyle Pitts, you have Drake London. My thing with the Falcons, I haven't seen enough from Desmond Ridder to trust that he's going to be able to handle that offense.
Right.
I mean, I feel like he had 1 year in Cincinnati when coming out of college where he really put himself on the radar. And then obviously he only played the last handful of games last year. So I haven't seen a big enough sample size myself to say that I feel confident in them this year. But I think that they obviously, it's not going to be for lack of weapons, right?
Absolutely.
They have the offense. Oh, and we're forgetting about the Swiss Army knife that is Cordero Patterson. He's still there too. So he's a special talent. Shout out fantasy football. Cordero Patterson.
Gave you quite a few.
Yeah.
A good season there.
So he single-handedly took me to the playoffs. I think it was last year, or the year before. So shout out Cordero. But yeah, I'm hesitant on the Falcons. I know you're high on them. I have to see a little bit more from Ritter before I get to that point. So
understandable.
Yep. So the next one you and I are very different on, which I think is always good for conversation.
Right.
And that's the Tampa Bay Bucks. I'll kind of go first on this one. I have always loved Baker Mayfield coming out of Oklahoma. I'm the biggest Baker fan. Obviously, he fell on his face in Cleveland.
Yes.
I think he was humbled. I think it's what he needed.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really his second chance and probably his last chance to be that guy.
Right.
So I think that he's coming in and he still has the weapons around. You think about Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. He's got some dudes to throw to.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think that Todd Bowles is a good coach. I don't think that he's, obviously he's a defensive guy.
Right.
But we'll see what that offense looks like. I have high hopes for the Bucks this year. Whereas you, I think, have them
not so high.
So I think that they have a chance to be really good. Obviously, this is life without Tom Brady, right? It's uncharted territory. So it's going to be a little bit of a step down because obviously Baker Mayfield does no Tom Brady, but I think that they have the opportunity. He kind of has the opportunity to slide in and be that middle tier, 8-9 win team, maybe fighting for a wild card spot. I don't think that they're gonna be fighting for the division necessarily, but me personally, I think that they could still be a halfway decent team. Whereas, go ahead, and you disagree.
Well, they got rid of a lot of elder players there. Leonard Fournette's not there anymore. Tom Brady retired, obviously, and along with numerous other players. They're definitely going youthful on that football team. I reflect them with the Rams of the NFC West. They had Stafford, Kupp, and Donald, but yet they had a lot of players who were 15 draft picks, I believe they had. So this is something along the lines with what the Bucks are doing. You got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin. You got some pieces there that have been there a while, some veterans. But at the same time, I don't believe Baker Mayfield is the answer. I didn't believe that when he went number 1 overall to Cleveland.
I wanted the Jets to draft him so bad that year. So bad.
Well, be glad you didn't.
Yeah.
I know he showcased some good stuff in LA last year when Stafford was down. But at the same time, his competition in Tampa Bay is Kyle Trask, and no offense to Kyle Trask, but it's not Tom Brady or anybody who's going to hold you to a high level of expectations. So Baker Mayfield, he's got that experience, and I think he'll come in and settle the offense for what it's worth. But I just don't see that team being that good or anywhere even close to second or even third in this division. I think it'll take a while for them to go full-fledged rebuild, and when they do, that's when you can start seeing some bright spots coming out of that team.
Yeah, so we'll see. We're obviously on two separate radars there with the Bucks, so that'll be an interesting one to kind of circle back after the year and see which one of us was closer there.
Right.
So last but not least, I know you're most excited about this. The New Orleans Saints. So I'll let you kick it off with what you think.
Well, the Saints, they've been my team. I explained why they were my team last episode, but coming in this year, we got a quarterback, Derek Carr. That's the biggest storyline going into the season is Derek Carr. How's he going to look? Is he going to take that step forward that's evaded him in Vegas or in Oakland before they moved to Vegas?
Yeah.
But I believe in Derek Carr. I think I've always loved Derek Carr. I've been a big Derek Carr fan for a very long time.
He's a good dude.
He's a very good dude.
Yeah.
I just think he's been put in very harsh situations with Vegas, Oakland, with the Raiders. We'll go with that. But to me, I think this is this is going to be his baby. This is going to be his chance. This is going to be his how he carries himself. This is going to be true Derek Carr. How I believed I've been seeing him for the past few years. Obviously, you got Kamara at running back. He's suspended for the first 3 games for beating up a guy.
Bar fight, right?
Bar fight,
yeah.
Yep. And I think in Vegas, so Vegas, that doesn't lead to good things. So, but they signed Jamal Williams, touchdown leader last year in the NFL.
Goal line threat.
The vulture. Yep. And they drafted a running back, Condre Miller. He should be ready for week 1. I know he got a sprain in his MCL, I believe, during the preseason, but he should be ready week 1. And then Michael Thomas, he's back. Hopefully you get a full healthy season out of him. It's been a very long time since he made it through a season fully healthy. I honestly can't even remember the last time he made it through a season fully healthy. I think it was that Offensive Player of the Year that he had back in 2019, I believe. But you got him, you got Chris Olave on the other side of the formation, and then you got Rashid Shaheed, which is going to be their slot guy. He's in punt returner, presumably. So offensive line is also rebuilt a little bit. They had a last year's first round draft pick. He's going to step in left tackle, and we'll see. I've heard he's a very mean guy. And he starts a lot of fights, a lot of scrums.
You need one of those on every team.
Oh, absolutely.
Every team has to have that guy.
Yep, and he's going to be that guy. So we'll see how many, I guess, personal misconduct penalties he'll have this year. I'm hoping he keeps that limited, but I'm hoping for great things from him. And then on the defensive side, you got Lattimore, Marcus May, Tyrann Mathieu.
Shout out Marcus May.
Marcus May, former Jet. That's right. And then they rebuilt their whole defensive line. They lost quite a few pieces besides Cameron Jordan, but drafted defensive tackle.
They still have Davis, middle linebacker.
And they still have Demario Davis.
I love that guy. Jets should have never let him go. He's a beast.
He's still there.
Beast.
Yep, he's the heart and soul of that defense too.
Yep.
So they have their pieces there in Cameron Jordan and Demario Davis who have been in that defense for quite a while.
Yeah.
So
Dennis Allen, second year as head coach.
Some continuity there after Sean Payton, and he was defensive coordinator for a couple of years before Sean Payton took off. But like I said, I see very little to not like in terms of what the Saints are doing. Obviously, you would have hoped they found a younger quarterback to replace Drew Brees, but obviously that didn't happen. And this whole Derek Carr situation was a blessing for both Derek Carr and the Saints, hopefully.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I think I have the Saints not only winning that division, but I have them, being one of the top seeds of the NFC. I think that they have a chance to be scary good, not only because I think Derek Carr was one of the missing pieces for that team, but they're in a not great division,
right? To
where you got to play the other teams that we just talked about 6 times. That should be 5 or 6 wins. I mean, and realistically, I think that Chris Olave is going to be a stud this year. I think that him and Derek Carr are going to have a huge connection. I'm not in on Michael Thomas like you are, just because you got to show me that you can finish the season healthy.
Right.
Obviously, Kamara being suspended the first 3 games, that'll hurt. But I think they have enough talent to kind of get past that.
Right.
We already talked about it. Football aside, I love Derek Carr as a guy. He's just a good guy. But I also think that he can sling it. He was obviously, if the Jets hadn't gotten Aaron Rodgers, that's who I wanted them to go after, was Derek Carr. He's easy to root for, and I think that he never got a fair shake in Vegas/Oakland.
Right.
So I think that he, kind of similar to Aaron Rodgers, kind of going to have a chip on their shoulder this year, like something to prove, like, hey, look what you missed out on.
Right.
So I think that could potentially go a long way. And I think that they already have a good defense. I think they're going to continue to be dominant, and I think that they're going to be one of the teams in the NFC this year. So I'm excited for you as a fan, because I think for both of us it should be a good year, hopefully. Right. So, all right, that is our review of each team. So we're going to go back and we're going to do our divisional predictions. Obviously, again, we're writing all these down. We're saving them so that at the end of the year we can go back on one of our last episodes and either talk about how smart we were or how stupid we were.
Cancel the show.
Yeah. So I'll go first. We'll do the AFC South. I have obviously the Jags. We talked about that. I have the Jags winning the division. I have the Titans finishing in second, the Colts third, and the Texans rounding out the division. Go ahead. Do you want to talk about your picks?
Yeah, I got same top two: Jags first, Titans second, and then I flip flop third and fourth place. I Texans. I think they just have a lot more potential than the Colts do. So I got Colts in the basement of the AFC South.
Yeah, and I think that's you can make that argument for either of those, right? The Texans or the Colts. I think it's both of them are. We kind of already talked about it. They're both rebuilding, kind of examining their quarterbacks and seeing where they're gonna head. So
right.
NFC South, we are. I just talked about it. I have the Saints winning that division, and to be honest, winning it easily. I don't really think that it's going to be a competition. I know all three of the other teams have done things to hopefully make themselves more competitive than last year. Obviously, the Bucs won. Were they 500 last year? They won the division.
I think they were one game
under 500. So there's only room for growth as a whole in this division. But I think it's going to be the Saints, pretty easily. So I have the Saints. I have the Bucs finishing second. I think that they still have some talent there to be competitive. And they have a lot of guys on that team who have been there before, who know how to win.
Right.
And I think that goes a long way, where the Panthers and Falcons are young and they have to figure that out. We kind of talked about that last week, right? Learning how to win is part of being a good football team.
Right.
So I have the Panthers finishing third and then the Falcons in the basement. Again, that just kind of goes back to what I talked about with Desmond Ridder and just not knowing enough about him, not seeing enough yet to know that if he can lead that team.
Right. So for me, I got the Saints up top. I think we're in complete agreement there. I got the Falcons in second over the Bucs.
I can't wait to review this week. I can't wait to review this at the end of the season to see which one of us was
the Falcons, the Bucs.
Yeah,
because we
Falcons
have them,
and the Bucs. We have them flip flops.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like I said, I like Desmond Ridder. I thought he showed a lot of promise last year. So I'm hoping a full off season of knowing you're the guy is going to carry him into the season and lead him to not a great season, but at least something promising to lead him into year 3 of his reign there. And then third, I got the Panthers. Bryce Young should. I believe in Bryce Young. I believe he's going to be a really good quarterback for a really long time.
Yep, I agree.
It just depends on how much talent and an overall skill you're going to have around you. I think you got DJ Chark as your number 1 there. That's a little rough. But yeah, we'll see there. And then running out the NFC South, I got the Bucs.
We'll go back and we'll put these clips together and see which one of us looks bad. At the end of the season, because one of us is going to look bad. That's fine. So that's what this is all about.
Absolutely.
So all right, so those are our predictions. Write them down. They're saved, and we'll go back to them at the end of the year. Before we end the show, we're gonna obviously we said we're gonna incorporate fantasy football into this podcast every week. And so this week we want to highlight some players from these divisions that we have our eye on for one reason or another. So we're going to do same thing we did last week, right? So our must-have player, the player that you have at the top of your list, your stay-away player, someone that you think is, maybe not going to have a good year. That
don't draft them.
Yeah, stay away. Don't draft them. And then, excuse me, your sleeper pick. And so for those who may not be familiar with the sleeper term, this is someone who is just under the radar, really has no expectations, but you think could potentially have a huge year, right? Your sleeper pick. So I'll let you start.
Okay. So for the AFC South, I got my must-have is Trevor Lawrence. I think he, like I said, it's going to be the Jags division to lose.
Yep.
Unlike last week where I had the Seahawks winning the NFC West, and I said don't draft Geno Smith, even though it's going to be a great team.
Yep.
No, for here, it's a different situation. This offense is built around Trevor Lawrence. He's going to spread it out to Calvin Ridley now. He's back from suspension. Christian Kirk, another year in that system. And then you got Travis Etienne. right there in the running back position. I think you have way too many skill players there for Trevor Lawrence to not be, in my estimation, a top 5 quarterback, scoring points from there overall. And then stay away. I got Michael Pittman Jr.
Yep.
I know.
I agree with that 100%.
I
Sorry,
know.
Wes.
Yeah, sorry, Wes. I know he's going to be their de facto number 1 wide receiver, and I always believe the targets have to go somewhere. But at the same time, just because they're targets doesn't mean they're going to relay the catches. So Anthony Richardson, you talked about it. He has only 300 pass attempts in his career over at Florida. So
accuracy is one of his critiques or one of his areas of opportunity also. Absolutely. So that could play a part.
Absolutely. So Michael Pittman Jr., he might get the lion's share of the targets, but does that mean he's going to get the lion's share of the catches and the touchdowns? I don't see it this year. And then sleeper pick, Dalton Schultz.
I love that pick.
Dalton Schultz, big signing for Houston.
Yep. Sneaky big signing.
Big signing. And then I know we're always looking for tight ends to match up for production with Travis Kelce and the Mark Andrews of the world. But Dalton Schultz, I think, will carry his success that he had in Dallas over to Houston. And you got Stroud there, young quarterback. And once again, a young quarterback's best friend is his tight end.
Yep.
So Dalton Schultz, my sleeper pick.
Yep, I'm on board with all 3 of those. So for my must-have, I think I'm kind of on the receiving end of your thought process with Trevor Lawrence. I think you got to go after Calvin Ridley. Obviously, he's going to be fresh. He's coming off a year of not playing. He's going to have fresh legs, and I think that he is going to be dynamic in this offense. We saw briefly, I feel like, what he was able to do with the Falcons a few years ago, and I think that he's just going to have a breakout year. So he's my guy that you got to go after. You got to get. Stay away. I'm staying far, far, far away from Jonathan Taylor because as of right now, it doesn't even look like he's going to play.
Right.
I feel like that situation is actually getting worse as we get closer to the season, where normally they get better, and one guy ends up he either ends up getting paid or he ends up just giving up and coming to camp.
Right.
Where I feel like this is not going away, and it's one of those things where I feel like even if he ultimately does end up coming back, he's going to have such little time to prepare and to get into football shape. It just screams injury to me. And so it's like, okay, even if you do draft him, he comes back. How long is he going to be healthy before it's a calf or a hamstring or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm staying far, far away from Jonathan Taylor. And my sleeper pick is Dameon Pierce, the running back from Houston. He had a great rookie year last year with not a lot around him. There was really no threat to pass last year with Houston, and Dameon Pierce still put up some really solid numbers. And so I think having Stroud behind center, having the option to be a little bit more mobile, having some weapons now with Dalton Schultz, I think that's only going to help the run game. Right. And I think that Dameon Pierce is even going to have a better year than he did last year. So those are my picks for the AFC South. I'll let you tackle the. Oh gosh. I'll let you go. I got such an issue. I got such an issue with this first pick. So go ahead. Go ahead.
NFC South.
Yeah.
I put 2 must-haves because I knew the first one, Nick, was not going to be all about it. I knew he was going to hate this pick. I put the Saints DST, defensive and special teams.
That's ridiculous.
It's a must-have.
That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. Look at his jersey. I mean, that's such a homer pick.
It is a very big
homer pick.
But it's a homer pick with knowledge and intelligence.
You can't say that a must-have is a defense.
Yes,
you just can't do it. That's like saying that's like saying your must-have is like
my thing.
Will Lutz,
a kicker?
Yes, it's the same
kicker.
thing.
No, kicker is way different. Defense, you're always starting off at 10 points or whatever it is. You're starting off at a base point percentage, and then from there, sacks, interceptions, turnovers. You're going to get a lot of turnovers from those other quarterbacks and those other offenses from that division. You got Desmond Ridder, you got Bryce Young, who's a first-year quarterback, and then you got Baker Mayfield. Oh, let's face it, Baker Mayfield, I'm not high on him. So I think that's going to be a lot of turnovers, a lot of potential for turnovers. That's 6 games, and then maybe some of those turnovers turn into touchdowns. That's 6 more points right there. So to me, that is one of your highest go-tos for defenses. If you like choosing defensives a little bit early from the last round or the second to last round from the end of your draft, go with the Saints defense. They will prove to be a must-have.
I am not disputing that they are not going to be a good defense. I think they're going to be a great defense.
Mm-hmm.
But for the purpose of this exercise, I cannot stand for that.
I personally, I just hate going through defenses on a weekly basis, and because sometimes you're crunched for a roster spot,
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden like, I have this great defense but it's on a bye, but I don't want to drop anybody else, and then boom, now you got to drop them, and then somebody else picks them up because they have the roster spot. So
that's what I was going to say. Is you're literally saying that your must-have is someone that like come week 9 or 10 you're going to have to drop.
Well, no, not for this team, because usually you're cycling through 2 or 3 defenses throughout the year. At least that's what I do.
Yeah.
But for me, I'd rather use that other roster spot for a position player, for another sleeper pick that I have or something. In this position, you got the Saints defense. You can only have one roster position for one defense. That's it. Use your other roster spots for players on the field. So to me, I think it saves you a roster spot, and it gets you points where you're going to need it. Moving on before he has an aneurysm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Drake London is my other must-have of that division, and I think we can.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna have to save this clip as well.
Oh, absolutely. This is going down.
This is just bad.
Drake London. He showed a great connection with Ritter last year, and during Ritter's time at QB. So I'm expecting them to take off from there. Kyle Pitts is obviously coming back, take off some of the targets there, but like I said, he's coming off from an MCL tear. So how much of an effect is he going to have? We'll see. But for me, Drake London is going to be the number 1 target there, regardless of anybody else's production. In terms of stay away, DJ Chark, number 1 receiver there in Carolina. I think Bryce Young is going to take a little while to develop the passing aspect of his game.
Yep, I agree.
I think if something's not there, he might take off, especially if the offensive line is not holding up like you were concerned about earlier. He's going to be running for his life for quite a while, and he's not going to be able to have DJ Chark develop his route, because DJ Chark is a go route runner type of player. He expands the field. So I think be wary about DJ Chark. And then sleeper, I got Rachaad White, which is going to be the number 1 running back there in Tampa Bay. I think Baker Mayfield is very fringe, so I think he'll be doing a lot of checkdowns. And the beneficiary of that is probably going to be the running back, and that's going to be Rachaad White. So PPR league, Rachaad White is a sleeper pick there.
Okay.
So I'll let Nick pick his real picks.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna. I'm done with the whole Saints defense conversation. I think that's just crazy as a must-have. But moving on, I think my must-have is Chris Olave from the Saints. We already kind of talked about it. I think that he's just gonna tear it up this year. I think when you talk about the amount of targets that he's up for, I think that he showed already in his rookie season how dynamic that he can be. When who did he have thrown to him last year? He had Taysom Hill
and Dalton
and Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
I mean, Taysom Hill, he's not. I don't know that he's even a real quarterback. So
he's a tight end.
He's a tight end right now, and Dalton, he's serviceable. He's kind of made his career as a backup, but you bring in a guy like Derek Carr, and I think that connection has a chance to be really special. So Chris Olave is high on my list. Not even when you're talking about the NFC South, just fantasy football in general. I'm staying away from Miles Sanders, the running back from Carolina, only because of what I talked about. I like Miles Sanders a lot. Obviously, he had big production in Philadelphia, but I just don't trust Carolina's offensive line yet.
Right.
I think that obviously it goes without saying you can't run the ball without a good O-line, and they've shown so far that they have major opportunity. And so I think that it's going to be questionable, especially when you factor in the rookie quarterback, Bryce Young. Typically with rookie quarterbacks, they coaches like to lean on the run to kind of give them a little bit of a break. And I think that defenses are going to kind of hone in on that, maybe stack the box. And I think that it's going to be tough sledding for Miles Sanders. So I'm staying away from him. And then my sleeper, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not really sure if he is considered a sleeper. I just know that with conversations so far this year with quote-unquote fantasy experts, I have not heard his name at all this year. And in years past, he's one of the guys that you hone in on. but I feel like he's under the radar this year, which is why I wrote down that my sleeper is Mike Evans. I think he could kind of go either way, right? He could be a sleeper or maybe not. Maybe he's just one of the guys that you're always looking for. But I expect him to have a big year this year. I know you disagree. I think
I almost had him in my stay away category.
I mean, that's just par for this episode. I think that our picks are just so drastically different. I can't wait to see how this season goes.
But it goes to how both South divisions are very unpredictable this year. A lot of teams are going through rebuild, and some have high hopes, like the Jags and the Saints. So,
yep. So that's Mike Evans. I think he's a dominant receiver again, regardless of who throws him the ball. Obviously, he showed what he could do with Tom Brady, but he also showed what he can do with a guy like Jameis Winston, who's throwing 30 plus interceptions a year. Yeah. So I think that Baker is a serviceable quarterback, despite what you think. He's kind of got that it factor, I believe, and I think that him and Mike Evans have a chance to still have a really good connection and kind of keep that team afloat. So
right.
He's my sleeper for this year. What's your comment? I can see you biting your lip.
No, like I said, we'll have the tape on.
Yeah,
we'll go back and look.
Yeah,
the end of the year.
Freaking Saints defense is a must-have. You got to be kidding.
Number one defense. I'm calling it now.
All right. Well, this was an entertaining episode. I think this is one of the few times. Normally, you guys will come to find out. Normally, Jeff and I share a brain when it comes to football, and specifically fantasy football. We're kind of notorious for stealing each other's picks.
Oh yeah, whoever picks in front of the other gets.
It's always like you got to look at the draft order and see where we're at, and if Jeff's ahead of me, I'm like punching a wall.
Nope.
Just because he'll take at least 3 or 4 guys that I wanted, that I circled ahead of time. So, but even when it just comes to like predicting games or teams, like we typically are on board with each other, and I feel like this episode and these divisions and these players were kind of just all over the place. So. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully this was entertaining for you guys and gave you something to think about. I mean, we gave you basically 2 different opinions.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, I guess
flip a coin.
I guess do with that what you will, and let us know which one of us you trusted and how it works out. But
right answer is neither.
Again, I had a blast. Well, next week we're going to break down the AFC and NFC North, which I'm excited because I feel like. Kind of, give you a little teaser into next week. I've heard that people think that the AFC North is the toughest division in football, which I can't wait to break down those teams. I tend to agree, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that next week. So stay tuned for that. And as always, if you guys have any topics that you are curious about or any questions or anything that you want us to discuss, please feel free to send it in, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, shoot, you could text us and say, hey, give this a shout on next week's episode, and we'll do it. We love doing these breakdowns, but we also would love to cover some stuff that you guys are interested in. So feel free to send that in, and we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Peace.
Thanks for listening to What Did They Know podcast. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media outlets to see future episode details, and don't forget to send in any questions or topics that you want to see the guys discuss in their weekly episodes to come.